A land torn apart by war, with the mighty at war and the poor at their mercy, was the case. The year was 1215, and it was destined to be that fateful date for a landmark moment in world history. Not exactly a storybook of kings and wars, this is the saga of one little piece of parchment that came to embody justice and freedom in the best way. King John of England, who has ruled with notoriously repressive policies, has brought the kingdom to near anarchy. Crushing taxation, endless military expeditions, and arbitrary justice have worn out and embittered his subjects. The barons, the great landholders, have grown increasingly restive under John's unending repression. He does not possess in any degree the personal charisma, the flair for martial glory that commands loyalty, as did his father Henry II, or his brother Richard the Lionheart. The kingdom stands at an edge, and the nobles' discontent has reached its height. Our story opens with a king, John less remembered for bravery or wisdom, but more for brutal ways and unquenched lust for power. King John's reign was marked by heavy taxation, constant warfare, and a strained relationship with his barons. The clinking of coins and the clash of swords muffled the strange happenings of pain for the people of England, and it was then that the wind of change would blow. The financial extortions by John have drained the coffers of the barons and impoverished the peasantry. Add to this the rigorous enforcement of forest laws and heavy fines for minor infractions. The kingdom is a tinderbox, and the barons are ready to ignite the spark of rebellion. In the shadows, they begin to plot their resistance, determined to curb the king's tyrannical rule and restore some semblance of balance. It was a time of utter discontent. King John's relentless demands for money to fund his wars in France had pushed his barons to the brink. The real breaking point came when, in 1214, John lost the crucial Battle of Bouvines, one that sapped not only his treasury, but also his credibility. Disgruntled and frustrated barons, tired of tyranny in the hands of the king, took an oath. These had been clandestine meetings, conspiratorial whispers of rebellion, and the need for a document that would rein in the king's powers, safeguard the rights of the people. The Battle of Bouvines was a catastrophe for John. His ambitions of recovering lost territories in France were shattered. Humbled and bankrupt, he came back to England to face the storm brewing at home. The barons, under the leadership of Robert Fitzwalter, an experienced and respected noble, united in what was termed the Army of God. They wished the king to conform to ancient customs and laws of the land. He was thus forced to give in to the pressure and accept negotiation. The barons, with the charismatic and dynamic leadership of Robert Fitzwalter, presented their demands before King John. This was a daring act that could have resulted in bloodshed. The king, perceiving his jeopardy, agreed to negotiate. And so, history was made on a field known as Runnymede, beside the River Thames. Runnymede was chosen to be a common, symbolic setting for that day. One day, as knights, clerics, and scribes gathered around the draft of grievances and lists of demands that had to be thoroughly taken down, the birth of the Magna Carta would be seen on June 15, 1215. The novelty in the contents of the document lay in the vast and bold undertaking whereby absolute authority from the king would yield before the protection and enforcement of his subjects' rights. Imagine this. It is a balmy June day in 1215, with the sun shining brightly over a meadow full of tents and banners. The air is filled with the sounds of distant voices and the clinking of armor as barons gather to discuss their grievances against King John. Tension hangs in the air as they prepare to confront the king, seeking justice and freedom from his oppressive rule. The air was thick with tension as King John and the barons came together to affix their seals on an agreement. The air was thick with tension as King John and the barons came together to affix their seals on an agreement. The air was thick with tension as King John and the barons came together to affix their seals on an agreement. It was not your usual gathering, a standoff between the crown and the subjects, where distrust in each other's intentions had made everybody suspicious. The document they were about to sign was called, in Latin, Magna Carta, or Great Charter. Its words would echo down the ages, shaping the very foundations of modern democracy. The atmosphere at Runnymede was electric, filled with a mix of hope, fear, and determination. The Magna Carta contained 63 clauses dealing with the protection of church rights, limitations on feudal payments to the crown, and other issues. It contained revolutionary concepts such as due process and the right to a fair trial. Each clause was another step toward responsibility and justice. The document was sealed by both king and barons, a momentous shift in the seesaw of power. But what did this Magna Carta say? Essentially, it was a list of promises by the king to his people. It was an attempt at redressing the grievances and laid down some general principles that were going to restrain the king's powers and secure the protection of some rights. Of course, one of the most groundbreaking laws had been the one, "No free man shall be seized or imprisoned, or stripped of his rights or possessions, or outlawed or exiled, or deprived of his standing in any other way, nor will we proceed with force against him, or send others to do so, except by the lawful judgment of his equals, or by the law of the land." Finally setting into place, given the circumstances at the time, was the prototype of the understanding that the monarch was not to consider himself above the law. The Magna Carta retained significance not only because of what was attained, but for its principles that endure to this day. In terms of constitutional law and civil liberties, it provided a founding. Until then, a revolutionary idea had barely ever been conceived, that the king was not above the law, and one that would serve as an inspiration to future generations in the struggle for rights. Its influence extends beyond England in shaping the legal traditions of many countries. The ink had barely dried upon the parchment when the air was thick with the scent of victory. The barons had scored a major victory, and for the first time, the king had been made to give in. All the same, this was merely the beginning. There was no fairy dust within the Magna Carta that would have resolved all problems in England. As a matter of fact, in several months, both sides have broken their promises, and a civil war was known as the First Barons' War. The document was annulled by Pope Innocent III, and its immediate impact seemed to disappear into obscurity. Quite turbulent were the after effects of the signing. King John tried to regain his lost power and retaliated against the barons. It was not long before this fragile peace was shattered, and the kingdom descended into the depths of a bitter civil war. The Magna Carta was a beacon of hope, but its immediate effectiveness was frustrated by the grim realities of political strife and the struggle for power. Yet the legacy of the Charter lived on. But great stories have a way of surviving, and the Magna Carta was no exception. Its precepts were from time to time revived and reaffirmed throughout succeeding centuries. It was to become a symbol of the struggle for freedom and justice, a beacon inspiring movements and revolutions far beyond the shores of England. When American colonists sought their independence from British rule, they invoked the spirit of the Magna Carta, claiming their rights and liberties. Its influence was to increase with age, becoming the foundation of all legal and constitutional thought. It was subsequently reissued and confirmed by later monarchs, setting its principles within English law, from where it crossed the Atlantic and inspired the American Revolution and the framing of the United States Constitution. This charter has lived to echo liberty and justice into our present times. Fast forward to the present time, and the Magna Carta remains a powerful symbol of the rule of law. Its spirit lives on in constitutions and legal systems worldwide. It serves as a reminder that the quest for justice and equality is a continuous journey, one that requires eternal vigilance and courage. The facets of the Magna Carta are so inwoven into the fabric of modern democracies. Due process, right to a fair trial, and limitation of arbitrary power remain some of the high features of the contemporary legal system. While dealing with the complexities of the 21st century scenario, the spirit of Magna Carta reminds us to be vigilant in protecting our rights and freedoms. The next time it enters your mind, imagine medieval history with a picture of the rebellious barons against their king, then a meadow at Runnymede with its parchment to change the course of the world. The Magna Carta is a birth of conflict. Undoubtedly, the abiding message carries hope and a people resolutely yearning for a just and good society. We recall, with this momentous point in history, how words could so well translate to carve a certain future. Magna Carta is essentially a story of resilience and inspiration that teaches one very valuable thing, that even under tyranny, people can come together to challenge it and demand their right to justice. The fact that this charter has been in use to this day, a standing testimony of the impact it had on history, testifies to collective action and in the pursuit of a just society. In the final analysis, the Magna Carta is not just a simple ancient document, but a testament to the eternal human spirit of freedom and justice. And that, dear viewers, is a story worth telling. The Magna Carta then beams as a torch of hope that guides humankind through the ages and stirs people throughout the world. It reminds us that the search for justice and equality has never had a time. It knows no borders and recognizes no generation. Let us forge this spirit ahead to carry on with our struggle for freedom and justice to all.